If you or a loved one are dealing with addiction, if rehab has failed you, you want to hear the story of my client Brian, who'd been suffering with a heroin addiction for years, and colon hydrotherapy changed his life. I'm Julialoggins, a gut health coach and colon therapist of 40 years. Here's Brian's story. Brian had been in the jewelry business. He'd been living in Bangkok, lots of drugs available. But what happened to Brian is that he had gotten hurt, had back surgery, been overprescribed medication, became addicted to opioids. When he got out of the hospital, he moved on to what was the easiest drug to find. That was heroin. When I met Brian, he had been in and out of 3 rehab facilities. Nothing had worked. He could get sober, he just couldn't stay sober. Brian's greatest fear is that his mental capacity and emotional resilience would never return. He was working with a neurologist. He was very motivated. He really wanted to get his life back on track. When I first started working with Brian, we saw each other 4 times a week. We were just trying to keep the withdrawal symptoms as mild as possible, and he was practically living in Epsom salt baths in between our sessions. He was also working with a colleague of mine, an acupuncturist, and one of her specialties was addiction. What I saw in the year that I worked with Brian is his desire to live return, his joy, his mental capacity, his emotional bandwidth. He went from being a very sad, depressed, frustrated person who felt like a complete failure in his life to feeling that he had conquered and climbed the biggest mountain of all time. The last time I saw Brian, it was 15 years after our initial meeting, and he was still sober. Statistics show that 7 out of 10 people who do rehab relapse in the first year. Why? Could it be the gut-brain connection? Could it be that they're not actually moving toxins out of the body? What do you think? I'm Julialoggins. I'd love to hear your questions and your comments. And if you're struggling with addiction, my heart goes out to you. But I believe there's hope.